Welcome to Ion Plainsboro. I am Lenny Soloro, Director of Recreation and Community Services for the Township of Plainsboro. With me today is Kate Nolan, our museum specialist. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
Kate is the newest member of the Department of Recreation and Community Services team. Kate, let me just ask you, you've been here for about 3 months now. What has your experience been so far working for the Township of Plainsboro?
Well, it's been fun learning about the unique history of Plainsboro as a small community, and it's been really great working with the museum from its infancy because it's brought together people of varied ages and cultural backgrounds who are all interested in the preservation of Plainsboro.
Just for the audience's notification, the museum has just reopened after it was closed for about 2.5 to 3 years. It coincided with the 100-year anniversary of Plainsboro, and we reopened it on Founders Day of this year. So it's very unique for a township to have such a beautiful museum. Kate, in your words, what's the significance of the Wicoff House?
Well, the house was built in about 1880 by John and Catherine Wicoff, who also owned several hundred acres of farmland around the house. And they raised their only child here, a son, John Van Buren Wicoff. And he later brought his wife here and raised his family here. And he actually lived in the house for over 70 years. He was the person who lived here the longest. So the house is named after him. In 1918, the residents of what was then the village of Plainsboro, inside of Cranberry Township and South Brunswick Township, wanted to have their own school, but Cranberry Township denied their request. So John V.B. Wicoff was actually one of several prominent residents of Plainsboro who successfully lobbied the New Jersey State Legislature to create the Township of Plainsboro. So it was created formally in May of 1919, and then the first school was completed in October of 1919. And later on, the school was renamed the J.V.B. Wicoff School in honor of his contributions to the development of Plainsboro. So this house is locally very significant as the lifelong home of one of Plainsboro's founders.
What efforts were made to restore the house in conjunction with the 100th year anniversary of Plainsboro?
So the township was able to supplement its own funding with grants from Middlesex County and the New Jersey Historic Trust to complete the restoration of the house. So for several years, the township was working on restoring the house as a museum to be opened in conjunction with the 100th anniversary. And while the construction was underway, the township also hired Hunter Research to complete the museum exhibits, which are what you see on display now. So these are the permanent exhibits, and we also have temporary exhibits which will be up from time to time.
Thank you. What types of objects are on display in the museum? Let the audience know what they can see when they come here.
So the objects that we have range from the mid-19th century to the mid-20th century, and they're really illustrative of the past 100 years in Plainsboro. So it shows how Plainsboro has gone from a small farming community to a town which is centered on innovation, education, and conservation. So we have tools from early farms here in Plainsboro. We have equipment from local research facilities, memorabilia from businesses and organizations which have contributed to the development of Plainsboro. And we also have objects related to prominent families in Plainsboro, such as the Wicoff family.
When is the museum open?
Our current hours are the second and fourth Sundays of the month from 12 to 4 p.m. But you can come during the week as well. You just have to have an appointment. You can call us or email us at museum@plainsboronj.com, and you can set up a time for you to come in and tour the museum, or to have a large group here interacting with one of our educational programs.
I know there's a strong interest in the community about this house and the love for this house. Is there a volunteer group that people can join?
There is an adult volunteer group that meets here at the museum monthly, and each volunteer contributes their time to our various projects and events as they are able to. So we need volunteers in various areas such as organizing the archives, developing events and programs, and helping with marketing and outreach. So anyone who is interested in volunteering and keeping the preservation of this house alive can contact us and be a volunteer.
The next question is I think is really neat and really cool in the 3.5, 4 months that you've been here, that you've developed a youth advisory council to the museum. What does the youth advisory council do?
So the museum's Youth Advisory Council is a way to connect teenagers to local historic preservation efforts by making them actively engaged in it. One of the main reasons that preservation fails on the local level is that there is a lack of sustainability because there's a lack of young people engaged in that effort. So one of the first things that we did here was create this youth council group to bring the young people in this area actively engaged in the development of this museum, and to ensure that they are personally invested in the preservation of Plainsboro. Because ultimately the work that we as adults do to preserve Plainsboro's historic resources is not for those of us who are currently adults, it's for those who are currently youth. For the Youth Council, they are learning the basics of how to operate a museum and archives so that they can see potential career opportunities in this field, but they're also working on various projects such as conducting oral histories, developing events, and helping to create temporary museum exhibits.
That is really neat. That is a really neat aspect
having
of the
fun.
museum. Yeah, exactly. What are the plans for the future of the house and the museum?
So the Wicoff House was preserved for the community as a monument to its history and as an active educational space. So over the upcoming year, we're going to be focusing on expanding the Youth Council program to include preservation workshops and various projects such as local historic resource surveys, so that the teens can really be immersed in preservation and so that they can become the greatest advocates for preservation of Plainsboro's historic resources. And we'll also be providing additional events and programs for families and adults, such as lectures, formal events, and free educational programming. So there's a lot of possibilities in the Wicoff House, so we're just excited about exploring them.
So we were just talking about events, and you're just telling us about events. Is there anything planned in the near future, event-wise, that has to do with the house?
Yeah, so we have several events planned. Our next event that the Youth Council is actually developing right now is it's going to be held on August 29th of 2019. And we'll make sure we pass out all the flyers for that. But it's a celebration of the history of Elsie the cow and Walker Gordon Farms. And this year is the 80th anniversary of Elsie's New York World's Fair debut in 1939. So in 1939, Elsie the cow debuted as a real cow who happened to be from Plainsboro.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you, audience, for tuning in to Eye on Plainsboro. We'll see you next time.